Hello, everyone. Welcome to NSLI-Y Interactive's second virtual event of the 2020-2021 academic year season. This is an intercultural communication panel. My name is Alexander, and I work for the NSLI team at Iron USA, and my colleagues Kyle and Lagaya will be helping out with this event as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. Let's start by going over some functions in Zoom first and how the event is going to work. Please make sure to stay muted if you're not talking. There'll be time later for an audience question and answer session, but for now we ask that you mute yourselves, and you can feel free to either be on camera or not. The event is going to begin by first introducing the NSLI program for those who might be unfamiliar with it, and this will be a brief presentation, and then I'm going to hand it over to our NSLI alumni panelists to give a brief introductions about themselves and their NSLI experience. Following that, Dr. Anu Taranant is going to give a brief presentation about how this topic of intercultural communication relates to her work and study abroad. And then we're going to move into a Q&A session, which is moderated by Anu, before we open up questions to the audience. We're going to encourage participants at that time to turn on their video and to unmute themselves in order to interact with the guest speakers, though of course you're also free to type in the chat box or type any question directly to me as well. Finally, we'll conclude the event with a short conclusion about NSLI and the upcoming application season, and it should be over by about 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So before our speakers present, I just want to give some background information for anyone who's not familiar with the program. Next slide, please. So the National Language Security Initiative for Youth, NSLI, or NSLI-Y, is a program of the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs. The NSLI program brings hundreds of students, over 600 students abroad every year to learn critical languages, which include Arabic, Chinese, Hindi, Indonesian, Korean, Russian, Turkish, and Persian. And NSLI has a lifelong impact, which I think these speakers here can definitely attest to and will talk about during their presentations. So I'm so excited for the panel we have here today. We've gathered a really incredible group of panelists and expert facilitator. Before I introduce them, I want to quickly ask a question in the poll. I created a poll for everyone to answer, and let me put that up now, and I'm really interested to see the results of this one. So you should be seeing the poll now, so feel free to answer, and feel free also to type in the chat box if you want to explain a little bit more, maybe where you went with NSLI, or where you hope to go, or what you hope to learn. All right, I'm just waiting on a few more to finish answering. One more person to finish answering, and then I'll share the results. All right, I think I'll share the results in a moment. So it looks like we have a contingent here who are NSLI alumni, a little bit over 10%, so that's exciting. Feel free to say in the chat box where you studied and what language you studied. Someone else who did a program outside of NSLI, and then many people who want to study abroad, which is, I assume, the reason why you're here, and that's super exciting, and I can't wait to get into this event with you guys, which is why I'm going to start with introducing these three alumni and our expert facilitator. So starting with her, Dr. Anu Taranant brings both passion and expertise to her work as a speaker, facilitator, author, and educator. A University of Washington professor for the past 19 years, she teaches about global issues, race, gender, identity, and equity. Her book, Beyond Guilt Trip, Mindful Travel in an Unequal World, was named a finalist for 4 book awards, including the Washington State Book Award, and included in Fodor's Travels, 13 Books to Inspire Your Travels, and Oprah's Magazine, Best 26 Travel Books of All Time. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, for the NSLI alumni, we have Halden, who is a current participant in the 2020-2021 NSLI Mandarin Chinese academic year program and serves as the NSLI alumni representative in the Chapel Hill, North Carolina Southeast region. She previously engaged in the 2018 NSLI Mandarin Chinese summer program in Chengdu, China. There's Ryan, who is an alumnus of NSLI's 2019 Arabic summer program in Rabat, Morocco, and an incoming freshman at Harvard University, where he hopes to pursue a major in government with a secondary in ethnicity, migration, and rights. As a Vietnamese Lao American, as well as the son of war refugees, he's passionate about empowering individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds and transforming environments to be diverse, inclusive, and uplifting. Josh is a sophomore Russian and Eastern European Studies and International Relations major at the University of Texas in Austin, and an alumnus of NSLI's 2016 Russian Summer and 2018 to 2019 academic year program. Josh plans to use his Russian skills in a prospective career in government service, helping craft our national policy towards Eastern Europe and Central Asia. In his free time, Josh enjoys cooking and trying new foods from across the world. For those of us who cannot join us today, we're going to be recording this webinar and we'll post it on the NSLI-Y Interactive website in the coming days, so feel free to tell your friends who couldn't join us today. But without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our NSLI alumni to briefly introduce themselves, their NSLI program experience, and how it relates to the topic of intercultural communication. We're going to be starting with Alden, who will be discussing her experience with NSLI, and we can stop sharing the slides now.
Great. Hello, everybody. 大家好. My name's Halmuthan, and I'm from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I recently graduated from the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics and will be continuing my education at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. In regards to my involvement with NSLI, as Alexander just mentioned, I am a 2018 Chinese Summer alumna. I traveled to Chengdu, China, the capital of the Sichuan province, and learned Chinese for about 6 weeks at the experimental school of Shuangliu Middle School. I'm also currently a part of the 2020-2021 academic year program as a part of the Kaohsiung, Taiwan cohort. Currently, we are not in Kaohsiung, Taiwan, but we're still learning Chinese at the Wanzhou Ursuline University of Languages virtually with my teacher, Zeng Lao Shi. In regards to, one of my most valuable intercultural experiences, I would have to say it would have to be learning more about how the disability community is supported in China. My older brother has spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy, so it's always affected how my whole family has operated, and especially when I was younger, traveling was really difficult because we had to ensure that the environments we were traveling to were accessible to all members of our family. And so when I was in China, I was very aware of the fact that there was very few international accessibility, disability signage, international disability accessibility symbol signage, which is like the little wheelchair dude you see on various signs. And then there also is very few public accommodations I could see outside. And I also rarely saw individuals with disabilities within the public environment. And so that really struck me. So that led me to pursue research on disability rights legislation in China during high school, and currently to be a part of the International Disability Rights Committee as an intern, doing research on international disability rights legislation, specifically in North Africa and the Middle Eastern region of the world. So I'm incredibly grateful to be here today and to talk with you all. So 谢谢你们.
Thank you so much, Alden, for that presentation. Now I would like Ryan to speak about his NSLI experience.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan, and as Alexander said before, I'm an incoming freshman at Harvard University. I'm taking a gap year before that due to COVID. I am an alumnus of NSLI's 2019 summer program in Rabat, Morocco, and that's where I studied Arabic for about 6-7 weeks at the Kalamala Center. I'm incredibly grateful to be here because the topic of intercultural communication means so much to me, and I really believe that it started even before I went on program to NSLI. It started when I started applying to the NSLI program in general. Some of you might relate to my story, but I am a person of color. I come from a family of war refugees. Every single person in my family is a boat person who escaped the Vietnam War. And because of that, there is so much prejudice and stereotypes that are built up regarding the outside world. Everyone views the outside world as scary because the legacy of the war still lives on in the memories or the medical problems of different family members, especially my parents, my mom and my dad. And so when I first applied to NSLI, and I learned that I won a scholarship to study Arabic in Jordan the first time, Amman, Jordan, I had relatives calling me, but they weren't calling me to congratulate me. They were calling me to tell me that I'm crazy in the head, that if I go, I will be killed by Jordan's government. I'll be assassinated, murdered, kidnapped, every horrible thing you can think of. But that I took it as a projection of their experience with the Vietnam War. And my own dad, he took my laptop and he pressed the decline button for me, um, and which I did not consent to. Obviously, I was very hurt, and he asked me. He sat me down. He asked me. He looked me in the eyes and he asked, "Ryan, what's wrong with you? Are you crazy? Are the Muslims in school brainwashing you, or what's going on?" That was a major red flag for me. It signaled to me that something really needed to be changed, and that this barrier is something that I needed to break through. I could not live my life and just leave things as they were. And so for the next year, I spent my time sitting down every single family member, both my parents, educating them on what Islam really means and comparing it to our own religion of Gaudaism, and just doing simple things to humanize the Muslim community, the Arab American community, such as bringing my best friend home from school, who's an Egyptian immigrant, to show he's just like me, just another 17-year-old who loves playing games and hates the school food. He's a person too. And showing foreign YouTubers on the television to show, oh, they're just like Vietnamese YouTubers. There's nothing different about them, besides they come from a different culture. And so after a really strenuous, long, exhausting year, I reapplied to the NSLI program, and I learned that I was a finalist again, but this time I would be placed in Morocco. And again, all my family members called me, but instead of telling me that I'm crazy, everyone was congratulating me, and they were so happy. Every single person was so happy to have a family member step foot in a Muslim majority country for the first time ever in our family's history and shed light on its unknown mysteries. The Muslim world is just something that we have no knowledge of. And so everyone was so curious this time to learn about its people, their way of life, and how different it is to us. So that's definitely one of the most meaningful experiences I've ever had. And I haven't even gotten into my NSLI program experience. That was just before. So I'm incredibly grateful here to talk with you all today. And if any of you have any questions about navigating the study abroad world as a person of color or as the child of immigrants or refugees, I'd love to speak to you more about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ryan. Now we're going to hear from last NSLI alumni panelist, Josh.
Hi everyone, my name is Josh. I'm an alumni of the 2016 Summer Russian program and the 2018 to 19 academic year program. I'm originally from Plano, Texas, but I do go to school in Austin at the University of Texas at Austin. I am a sophomore international relations and Russian and Eastern European studies major. And my NSLI-Y experience is probably the most formative experience of my life to this point. Growing up, I grew up in a pretty diverse community of North Dallas, and I was surrounded by various different cultures, but never really had the experience to fully immerse myself and understand what it's like to be in a different country, in a different community. So my NSLI-Y experience definitely broke many, I guess, preconceived notions of the rest of the world and specifically Eastern Europe in general. When I traveled to Eastern Europe in 2016, much of the media coverage was on Eastern Europe at that time, surrounding the election and previous events in the region. And going there, it opened my eyes to so much more that the world has to offer. I mean, I fell in love with Russian. I'm still studying it to this day. And without my NSLI-Y experience, I do not think I would be here studying at UT or on the same path as I am today.
Thank you, Josh. Now we're going to hear from our expert facilitator, Dr. Anu Taranant, who is going to be giving a short presentation on the topics of intercultural communication and study abroad.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, based on where you are. I'm Dr. Anu, and I'm delighted to join you all today. Just to remind you, Alexander gave my introduction a while ago. I'm faculty at the University of Washington in Seattle, and I've been here for a while now. And the topic of my focus in my classroom and in my research and in a lot of my consulting work is what are the ways that we navigate our similarities and our differences. To say that we are all alike in the world is a beautiful thought, but it also is not attentive to the actual differences in our lives around power, around privilege, around advantage, class, income, race, experience, right? But to say, on the other hand, that we are totally unlike one another is also not so accurate, right? We are just regular people, all of us, doing the best we can with the tools that we have. All of us want a good family. All of us want a safe home. So many of us are working to make life better for more of us. And that is something that you see across communities, right? So much of my work is thinking about the links between our similarities and our differences and the overlapping space between them. I'm also the author of this book that you can see here, Beyond Guilt Trips, Mindful Travel in an Unequal World. And it's a book that came out last year. And it's a book that's inviting conversation on so many of the themes that Ryan, Halden, and Josh have just mentioned. How do we travel abroad in a more ethical way? What does it mean to be from, for example, a high income country traveling into spaces and communities with less than what we have? And what are some of the complex feelings that emerge for us? What does it mean to suddenly be a foreigner in a different land? What does it mean to maybe blend into a different land, unlike our home? And how our travel experience is very much formed by our own experiences, right? Our own identities, our own race, our own families. How do we make sense of this? And I'd like to just kind of build on what some of our student panelists have shared. So here's the thing, right? We're in a pretty divided moment in our country. That seems like such an understatement these days. How do we make sense of these divisions from a longer historical lens, and also from a lens of wanting to make life better for more of us? What does it mean to be able to use some of the advantages and opportunities that we might have in front of us to be able to humble ourselves to learn about others in a way that can actually move the needle on what our society looks like, right? Programs like NSLI-Y and so many other programs that give our students opportunities to go abroad, to study language, to be immersed in another culture. This is extraordinary opportunities. I do a lot of study abroad work at the University of Washington, as well as around the country as a consultant. And I'm constantly amazed at how, as Josh said in his small narrative, it's a transformative experience, right? Being able to be elsewhere for a good amount of time, cut off from our usual, and now in a new space, right, allows us to craft ourselves from a different brush. It allows us to paint ourselves differently, right? And that kind of reimagining of who we are that is in community with the people that we are meeting abroad, right? It is in the host families that we stay in. It is with the students that we become friends with. It is with the shopkeeper that starts to recognize us as the person that comes in and buys a newspaper every day, right? These are those small experiences that start helping us figure out who we are elsewhere. And that knowledge, and I have heard this from hundreds of students over the years, being able to figure out who we are elsewhere is such an incredible gift when we are back home as well, right? It's not just a experience that we enjoy when we are in Morocco, Russia, or in China. It's an experience that continually offers us a deepening of our humility, a deepening of our sense of camaraderie with others, and a deepening of our sense of that kind of space between our differences and our similarities, right? Once again, we are not that different from one another. And you can't pretend, though, that the differences between us don't matter. It's something in the middle of that. And being able to study abroad, to learn language, right, is an incredible gift at being able to thread some of these ideas together. So I'm just once again so pleased to join you all here in this panel. This is my life's work, creating more conversations around these kinds of themes. I'm a strong advocate for this work, and it's nice to meet other students who are also enjoying the benefits of this kind of really intentional travel, right? Traveling on holiday is one thing, but traveling for study, traveling to know it's going to be hard in some ways, but this is exactly what you should be doing, that's a very different sort of travel, right? I'd like to engage our panelists. Alexander, that's fine. Yes, please.
Please go ahead, and we're pleased to
Sure.
have.
Yeah. So Ryan, Halden, and Josh, going abroad when you don't know people can be really scary. Why is it really important to still do so? Choosing to do this is, yes, it's a privilege. Yes, it's an honor, but it also takes a lot of courage, right? Why are you three so glad that you ignited your courage and you were able to participate in a program like this? Can you share with us, please, a little bit? Halden, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm clearly very grateful for NSLI because I've come around a second time. And I think the one thing that is really important, even though, I mean, studying abroad is, of course, is challenging because you're in an unfamiliar environment. I mean, sometimes you'll be homesick, sometimes you won't like the food, but it's really important because it helps you understand, you know, another person's perspective, another person's culture, and also in turn helps you better understand your own identities within a different cultural context. Like one thing that I do every day is I go for a run, and I didn't realize how like important that was until I studied abroad. And you know, I'd have like I had a young girl come up to me and like start running with me, or I'd run with my host dad. And like one time I had a guy give me a bottle of water, and it was a great way to connect with other people in a way I never really realized. It was just something I did when in here in America that I hadn't realized would be such a great way to connect with other people and develop these, you know, lifelong connections with other people that enjoy, you know, athletics and staying in shape.
And it's those really small moments that are so meaningful, no? Somebody
Yeah,
giving you a bottle of water as you're running, that sounds very small, but also those small moments can really land nicely on our heart, no?
yeah. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's wonderful because like being in another community, you realize like how important those identities are to you. You know, beyond just your outward appearance, like the habits you have and the things you share with other people. Like one time I made biscuits because I'm from the South. I was like, I wanted to share a little bit of Southern culture. So I made biscuits for my host family, and they made dumplings for me, which are really difficult to make. And it was wonderful having that, like, you know, sharing our cultures and, you know, developing like a lifelong connection because I'm still in contact with my host family. It's been wonderful during this pandemic to like, you know how they're doing since they're in China and I'm here in America across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ryan, why are you so glad that you did something really challenging? I mean, convincing your family is one kind of challenge, right, that you shared with us. And I studied abroad when I was a youngster also, and my story looks very similar to yours, right? It was a very unusual thing in my community for someone like me to go abroad. So I understand that challenge, but the challenge of being abroad is a different sort of challenge, no? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. So I found that uh, a major reason why it was so important for me to be in this space where there was virtually no one who really looked like me was that my presence alone initiated dialogue and conversation. Um, an activity that I did all the time when I was living in Morocco was go to the souks, the old markets, and barter with the shopkeepers there. And every time I'd walk through the streets of the souk, people would be staring me up and down. Until one day I had this man come up to me, and he was 6 foot tall, 6'5" even maybe. And he was this tall Moroccan man with a huge bushy beard. And he did a 90-degree bow in front of me, and he said konnichiwa. At that moment, I was scared for my life. I wanted to run away and just not interact with him at all. But something in my mind pushed me to stay there and have a conversation with him. And I think that was largely a reason why I wanted to be there in the first place, to be thrust into these uncomfortable positions and situations and see what comes out of those. And so his name is Aziz, and we talked for a good solid hour and a half maybe. And I talked to him about how America is such a diverse place, drawing people from all cultures and religions and backgrounds. And he talked to me about how it's the same thing in Morocco. Morocco is super diverse itself. He's actually Berber, which is the ethnic minority in Morocco. Everyone has a different story in Morocco. And for me, it was eye-opening to learn about that, to learn that, oh, Morocco is not just one person. It's as colorful as the US is. And after we had that conversation, he invites me to have lunch with him. And I'm thinking that we're going to go to a restaurant or something. But instead, he takes me to his sunglasses shop where he sells the sunglasses and hats. And there's a cabinet, and he opens the cabinet under a shelf, and he pulls out this cardboard box that has steam coming outside of it. And so I am so confused. I don't know what's happening, but he opens the cardboard box, and inside is a tagine, which is this clay pot that's sort of triangular. And he opens it, and it's full of these steaming, delicious looking vegetables. And so for the next 15 minutes, we're just sitting on the floor of the souk with hundreds of people walking by us, having a meal together, these two strangers from completely opposite sides of the world with super different stories and identities, sharing a meal together and talking to one another. Even though my Arabic was broken and his English was broken, we still bonded during that time. And those little moments, I think, are so valuable and so important to have, because they provide a way for mutual understanding. It's not you learning about them, it's not just you learning about them or just them learning about you. It's you two learning about each other. So as you're teaching, you're learning as well. And that is so valuable, so important.
Yeah, aren't you glad you didn't run?
Yes, I'm so glad.
Right? Glad that you stayed. Yes, good. Thank you. Josh, I'm curious to hear from you also, just like your classmates have shared. Why are you so glad that you found courage to do something that sometimes might feel a little scary for us?
Yes, so I think one of the biggest things with my NSLI-Y experience is I was able to find my identity. I guess going abroad and being surrounded by both Americans that you don't know beforehand, and then being immersed in a whole completely different culture, it's a real reality check on your biases, your privilege, your preconceived notions. And I definitely say that my NSLI-Y experience definitely opened my eyes to the inequalities both within the United States and within the world, and how we can have a better dialogue. I mean, some of my best conversations with people in Moldova were just simple conversations about, why are you here in Moldova? I mean, Moldova is not somewhere that Americans usually travel to. And so they were always very interested as to what American students were there doing, studying Russian. I mean, some of my best conversations were with my host family just about daily life in America. And I mean, one of the biggest misconceptions, I'm from Texas. I'd be asked if I've been asked if I ride a horse everywhere, which, I mean, of course I don't ride a horse everywhere, but it's just one of those funny little things that is portrayed by the media in the US that Eastern Europe and I know other parts of the world seem to think is real. So it's just the dialogue that I was able to have with people in Moldova is something that I will always cherish, and I hope to have more experiences like that in future study and travel.
You know, what I'm hearing from all three of you is that there are these very big opportunities that we can avail ourselves of, like the NSLI-Y program. And one of the beautiful things about these big opportunities are these really small moments that we leave with, right? These small engagements that we have with people that stay in our minds and in our hearts, and in, I think, really instructive ways. They help us reframe who we are in relation to other people. I want to ask you all one other question, and then we'll, of course, open it up for questions from all of our participants here. Why right now is it a really good time for young people to think about traveling and studying abroad? Of course, at this particular moment, we're in our pandemic, things are looking different than they have in the past, right? Of course. And at some stage, I'm certain, we will be able to be moving out about like we have before, hopefully with more intentionality, hopefully with more thoughtfulness, right? And so when people are traveling abroad now at some stage, why do you think it's really important in such a divided world, in a world in which we often are with people just like us? Why is it important for perhaps some of the potential applicants who are here tonight, right? What would you say to them? Why right now is it an important time to be considering an opportunity like this? Halden, what would you say?
I mean, study abroad is always really important because in doing so, you're able to engage in citizen diplomacy and, I mean, help other people understand like what America is, and understand like there's more to America than just like lots of white people or people that are really loud and obnoxious. Like there's a lot of diversity, people that come from all across the world. And it really also helps you, I mean, understand, I mean, another culture, as I mentioned before, and sometimes even start adopting, you know, consider your own practices in life and how you could change them in a way by learning from other people and their practices. Like, for example, I've always grown up as a Lutheran, and one thing that I became really curious of in learning Chinese was all about Soto Zen Buddhism, or Zen Buddhism specifically, because Zen Buddhism originated in China. I mean, Buddhism originated in India, but the Zen Buddhism is mainly from China. And so, like during this time where I have a little bit more time here in America, since I'm not in Taiwan, I decided to try to start practicing Zen Buddhism by reaching out to a temple in California, and I met with the abbot there, and it was a really wonderful experience. He shared a lot about his life, and you know, I shared a little bit about who I was, but it was wonderful just listening to him. And you know, I've learned a lot about, you know, Zen Buddhism, and it all started with really the study of Chinese and, you know, a desire to learn more about my own religious and spiritual beliefs and, you know, understand other people. I mean, I think in this world, we have a lot less conflicts if people just try to listen to one another and understand where other people are coming from. I try to do so even when people have a view that's really different from my own, because I think respect and care for other people is always important, no matter where somebody else comes from, or whatever their perspective is, whether it is against your own or in agreement with your own.
It
Yeah.
transcends politics in a lot of ways. They're very human characteristics and human qualities, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Ryan, what would you say to prospective applicants or their families that are listening? Why right now is it really important to consider something like this?
On a similar tangent as what Holden says, I believe study abroad, especially during these years, is incredibly important because it fosters empathy that you'll carry with you for the rest of your lives. Right now, most of you are teenagers in high school, I believe, or maybe you're college students if you're alumni. But as you start to navigate spaces in your own hometowns and your own communities, you're going to keep those experiences that you took away from living in those other places. And you're going to remember to be empathetic in that way. And you have all these, you used to have these preconceived notions of people living in whatever country you studied abroad in, but now that has completely changed, and you have the ability to share that with the people in your own lives, whether it's your parents, your friends, your family, your community members. I know for me, at least when I go on to college, I'm definitely going to be talking about my experience in Morocco. And if anyone dares to, I guess, insult the Moroccan people, I'm there, and I can use my own personal experiences as a way to foster understanding of different people. Because during my time in Morocco, I had such incredible conversations with just day-to-day people. One man that I spoke to was Sahrawi, and he talked to me about how those people are those who come from the Sahara Desert. They grew up there in the Merzouga. And so he talked to me about how life is so different there compared to the city, compared to Rabat, where I was living. People there, they don't have access to doctors. So whenever they found a bump or something on their skin, they'd have to just deal with it or travel days to get adequate medical care. And he talked to me about how there weren't gyms or anything. So if you wanted to work out and be buff, you had to take those gallon water bottles, cut them in half, and fill each cement and put a metal bar through. And that's how you make a dumbbell. So those little things increased my understanding of the world, and also made me understand that the world is so much more complex and diverse than we think. We can't paint one place with the same brushstroke. It's so many different colors and patterns, textiles, hues. It's unfair to look at a place and have one image in mind only. And so as you all go on your study abroad experiences, you're going to find that the understanding you have in your mind of wherever you're going is going to expand. And it's going to expand so much. And when you come back from your study abroad experiences and live life, you're going to realize that all the decisions you make have been impacted by your study abroad experience, and you're no longer that, I guess, unexperienced person you were once before. And so it's incredibly important to have an experience like this early on in your life, because as you go on to become lawmakers, lawyers, doctors, we need empathy and understanding in places like those, whether it's the medical field or in our universities, our colleges, our government. You're all going to go on to do great things. And if you can carry an experience like this with you, the world is going to be such a better place.
Yeah, nicely said. Thank you. Josh, you've heard some wonderful things from both Ryan and Halden. What would you like to share and offer in terms of advice to some of the folks that are here listening today about why right now is it exactly the time to be considering an opportunity like this?
I mean, the biggest thing I would say is you're at the age, I mean, both high school and college students, where you have very few responsibilities in life. Most of you don't have car payments, house payments, a job. Some of you have jobs, but this is the time where you have the ability to explore the world in a way that you will not be able to when you're an adult having a 9-to-5 job. I mean, one of the biggest things that I learned from my study abroad experience was independence. I mean, just trying to figure out how to navigate public transportation in a new country is overwhelming at first, but it's one of the things that I think it's something in America that we take for granted that we have cars. And I learned that public transportation is something that I think is very underappreciated in the United States. Simple things like that, empathy, putting yourself in the shoes of others. I mean, I guess the ease of life in America is something that I took for granted before my study abroad experience. When I lived in Moldova for my second NSLI-Y experience, I lived in a more rural area, and so to go to the grocery store or go into the city, I had to plan ahead. It wasn't like I could just get in the car or just walk outside my door and catch the bus. I had to walk 15 minutes to one bus stop, take the bus into the south of the city. And it's just simple things like understanding that we are very fortunate in the United States, and that there are places in the world that do not have it as easy as we do, and just understanding that empathy and using that in the future when you're in positions of power, like lawmakers, within the bureaucracy, foreign service, things like that. You're at a very impressionable time, and these things like study abroad are experiences that will forever change your way of thinking.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with so much of what you all have shared today. Spot on. You all are such thoughtful, courageous, and really empathetic young people. Sometimes this world makes me a little nervous about what our future looks like, and then I spend time with young people and I remember, oh yes, I think we're going to be okay. So it feels nice to talk to all three of you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for those great questions and for sharing. We're going to open it up to the audience now. I did receive one question through private chat, so I'm going to ask that question first, but please be thinking of questions you want to ask and feel free to either type it or unmute yourselves. First, I had a question exactly about youth, essentially, and perhaps just one of you can answer this one. The question is about how is the NSLI experience for someone who is quite young, on the lower end, like in 9th grade? I don't know at what age you guys went, but maybe even if you're a little bit older, now that you have a little bit more wisdom with age, how can you look back and see how the NSLI experience was in terms of intercultural communication when you're a quite young adolescent? Maybe just one of you can take on that.
I think I can try and answer that question. So my first NSLI-Y experience was after, once I just finished 10th grade. And I definitely would say that you do mature within age throughout high school. And I think one of the things to remember is that you're there to learn the language, but you're also there to discover yourself. So just one thing that I noticed that I did on my first summer program is I would surround myself with my American cohort. And I think one of the things to remember is use this experience and push yourself out of your comfort zone. You're gonna be in uncomfortable situations, but those are some of the situations that have the most impact on your experience and your mindset to come.
Thank you so much for sharing. I just received another question that I'd like to ask, and anyone feel free to answer this one. What was the hardest challenge to overcome when you got to the country, and how did you overcome it? I'll call on someone. Let's go with Ryan.
So, as I mentioned before, probably the biggest challenge for me was to overcome people who would stereotype me and believe that I'm someone I'm not. For example, whenever I would have a conversation with a Moroccan and I tell them that, oh, I'm American, I'm American, they would not believe it. Man, he said, are you sure you have Japanese face? How can you be American? And those comments, of course, originally I was very, I guess, shocked. Over time, I got used to them. But I guess what that taught me was that they're not necessarily saying things like that to offend you or to hurt you in any way. They're simply curious. They've lived in this homogeneous society all their lives, and all they're exposed to is, oh, the United States is blonde, American, blue-eyed, or that's how people in Europe look as well. They don't know about the United States diversity, how multicultural, how multifaceted it is, and that it's a safe haven for refugees, for example, like my family are refugees from Vietnam, and they don't know that because it wasn't taught to them in their school systems, their education. And so that took a little bit of time for me to get used to. They thought that, oh, if you're Asian, then you can only be one of three ethnicities. You can be Chinese, you can be Japanese, you can be Korean. So when I told them that, oh, there's this whole other section, Southeast Asia, and also South Asia is included in the definition of Asian too, they were flabbergasted. Their mind was blown. And so I guess that was what really made up for the initial shocked moment that I had before. Even though I was uncomfortable in the beginning, having those teaching moments that I could share with other people, that made up for it. And honestly, I don't regret having to go through those moments.
Thank you so much. I've received a few questions in the chat. There's a question about how you persuaded maybe family members who were unsure about having people go on program. This is also, I would argue, intercultural communication perhaps. How did you persuade them to go because maybe they didn't want you to?
I guess I can speak again, especially since this question is very relevant to my own experience. So I'm assuming, well, at least it's very common in immigrant families to have this huge stigma about studying abroad and learning a language that's not English. Because when I was going through my study abroad process, my parents would ask me, why are you studying English? I mean, studying Arabic, that's not English. We worked so hard to get here. We had to sacrifice so much. And now you want to go somewhere else other than America? You want to learn a language that's not English? But at least for me, and I know that it's a common trope that a lot of immigrant parents have the belief that educators are in these really well-regarded positions. So what I did was I contacted teachers in my high school that personally went to like Muslim countries like Jordan. For example, my history teacher, she visited Jordan before, in Morocco as well. And I asked her to contact my own parents and tell them about the time she spent there. And she had amazing things to say. So if you can identify individuals that your parents trust and ask them to be the communicators or to talk to them, I'm sure they'll build up trust slowly. Um, and usually those people are around the same age as your parents, adults, because if you ask a teenager to talk to your parents, they might not take them as seriously. But if you can find professors, teachers, neighbors who are the same age as your parents and have them talk to them, then I'm sure slowly they'll start opening up to the idea.
Thank you. We probably only have time for a few more questions, and I probably won't be able to get to all of them. Holden, since you haven't answered, I'll ask this one to you. Communication can be hard in any context. What best practices do you have for intercultural communication?
Yeah, communication, especially when you're not fluent in another language, is really difficult. But there's other ways you can communicate also through your actions. Like, I know in my host family, I wanted to make it apparent that I really respected them and I wanted to not impose myself on their lifestyle. And so I was like, I tried to communicate with them and be like, I'm willing to help you with the dishes or whatever I can do in the household to ensure that, I'm not a guest, I'm a part of your family. So I think a big part of communication is, um, you know, acting in a way that is respectful to like your host community and your host family. Of course, utilizing your language skills is incredibly important so that you improve your language skills and you're able to communicate with other people verbally. Um, yeah, I think the big thing is just, you know, having your actions express, respect and, a desire to be a part of the host community and not impose yourself upon, another person's way of life. Because the goal is not to be a guest, the goal is to be a part of the community as much as possible. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have time maybe for one or two more questions. I'm looking through what we've received. There's been multiple questions about this, so I'll ask this. A lot of people have asked about the experience you had prior to coming to the country, whether you had experience with the country's language or had traveled there before, knew its culture, and maybe how that related to how you were able to adapt. Josh, would you like to answer that one?
Sure, yes. So before I studied in Moldova the first time, I had very minimal Russian experience. I did a Star Talk program the year before. But when I received my NSLI-Y email, the immediate thought was I was going to Russia. So I was like, I told several of my teachers, oh, I'm studying abroad in Russia for the summer. And I go back and reread the email, like, wait, I'm studying in Moldova. I have no idea what Moldova is about, what it is like. I could barely say the name of the capital. But after doing some research, I became really excited and I was excited for the opportunity to study abroad somewhere where most people I knew had never heard of.
Thank you. Let's ask one more question, then we're going to have to conclude. So there was a question from someone who said that as an African-American male, he's concerned about how he might be treated and received by his host family or in certain countries. Maybe you can't relate exactly to that, but based on what you know and what you've experienced, how you maybe respond to this prospective applicant?
I mean, NSLI does a really good job ensuring that you have a lot of support within the country. Of course, you have your host family, and if you ever have problems with your host family, you can communicate such with like a local coordinator, and there's even higher ups if the problem goes even further. And of course, you have like your teachers are generally really, really receptive to you and your needs. Yeah, so there's a lot of support within country, like your host family, your teachers, the higher ups, the NSLI administrative team, if you need so. But yeah, I mean, I guess every country is a little different. And I personally, I mean, I can't really speak from experience, but I know there's a lot of support available to you if you ever encounter any sort of problems within the country.
Thank you. And I just put a resource in the chat as well for students who might be interested. So thank you so much to all our panelists and to Dr. Taranath for this great series of presentations and questions and answers. I apologize to everyone that I wasn't able to get through everyone's questions, but we're going to be sharing some resources in a moment, and this will help give you some more answers. And we're also going to be holding more events, and you can also go to the NSLI Interactive website as well, which will be one of the resources we share. Gaia, can you, yeah, thank you. So here are the resources I was mentioning. First, I just want to highlight very quickly that the application deadline for the 2021-22 programs is rapidly approaching. It's November 5th at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so get those in. If you're looking for a lot of logistical information on the NSLI program application, please visit nsliforyouth.org. And to read about student experiences and alumni stories and see virtual event recordings like this one, you can go to NSLI-interactive.org. Before everyone goes, I would request that you please click the link to the survey I'm going to be sharing in a moment. So you can help us have better virtual events, and you can share with us what worked for you, maybe what didn't work, how you found out about the event. I'm going to be sharing it in the chat right now. Sorry, one moment. So there's the form. It will only take a minute or two to fill out, and it's really important so we can make sure to have great events that are good for everyone and inclusive for everyone. Please go to these resources if you're interested in learning more about NSLI. I really encourage you to check out NSLI Interactive to read more about alumni experiences, which include a lot of these things that we've been talking about. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and especially to our NSLI alumni panelists and to our expert facilitator, Dr. Taranath. Thank you so much. And I hope you all have a great night and continue to consider studying abroad if you're a prospective applicant. It will be an amazing experience. Thank you.